As Jonathan's wealth grew, so did his demands, especially for the women he slept with without regard for the morality of his actions. He had already been married twice, and both former wives were unhappy with his constant cheating. Jonathan believed that since he worked hard, he deserved indulgences, often disregarding the feelings of others, especially his wives. Rebecca became his third wife, whom he married largely at her insistence. About 2 months after the wedding, Jonathan was already more excited about his newly built cottage than his wife. The cottage symbolized his success: a huge estate, manicured gardens, a swimming pool, and luxurious interiors. Rebecca seemed sidelined, overshadowed by the grandiosity. Most of the guests had left the party, but a few had stayed the night, leaving Jonathan alone by 2 in the morning. The only person awake was his mother-in-law, Margaret. She intrigued him, calculating and expensively dressed. Margaret insisted on being called by her first name, avoiding formalities that made her feel older. "Miss Margaret," Jonathan greeted her, and she replied, "No, John, I like your house. It is at the top of my list because it has soul." Jonathan asked if she was tired, and she replied, "Not really. I just need the company." She mentioned a pool table in the basement and offered to teach him to teach her. Jonathan agreed. He was curious. Margaret picked up her martini glass and headed for the stairs. Jonathan followed her, noticing her swaying. They sat across from each other at the pool table. "Do you know the rules?" asked Jonathan. "Yes. Let's get right into practicing," Margaret replied, her voice hinting at something more. Jonathan couldn't help but notice the double meaning in her words. He adjusted the position of her hand on the table, wanting to be closer to her. "By the way, what are we playing for?" asked Margaret. "Do we need a prize?" replied Jonathan, intrigued. "Of course we need one," she said, flashing her eyes. "Let's play for a wish." Margaret's demeanor changed as she broke the pyramid, confidently placing several balls in the pot. "I want to talk about you and Rebecca," she said, sending another ball into the hole. "I know you're going to cheat on her. It's only a matter of time." Jonathan was stunned by her bluntness. Margaret continued, "Of course she'll find out, but I want the benefit of keeping it a secret." She smirked as Jonathan moved closer, showing that she could not only play pool, but also manipulate people. The tension in the room was palpable. Jonathan hadn't felt this adrenaline rush in a long time. Margaret leaned toward him and whispered, "Are you ready to play for real now?" After seeing his guests off, Jonathan hurried to the basement, where he found evidence of their game, the bodice in the corner pocket. He could not deny the excitement that swept over him. It was reckless and intoxicating, and he wanted more. Margaret was a mystery he needed to solve, and he was already in too deep. Days passed. Rebecca noticed nothing, and Jonathan became more and more immersed in thoughts of Margaret. He repeatedly replayed their meeting in his mind, and every detail was vivid. One evening, Jonathan received a message from an unfamiliar number. Same place, same stakes? His pulse quickened, and he replied, "Absolutely." The game had just begun, and Jonathan was ready to see how far it would go.